Welcome back to the OneCast fans. This week we're going to talk about a multitude of topics, from the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, Ben Milliken proving the haters wrong, to some of our local fishing recaps.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What is going on, fans of the OneCast? Episode 18. As always, I'm Pete. I got Trey across from me, Ben here to my right. This week we got a bunch of stuff we want to talk about. Hopefully you all have been enjoying the content. You just listened to Alex with Missile Baits. We had Corey on a couple weeks ago, so we wanted to talk about some stuff amongst ourselves and not necessarily have a guest this week. As always, I want to plug OneCast Fishing. Head over to onecastfishing.com. Check out our line of snagless jigs. Long neck hooks. We also have the weedless Neds. Get yourself some ordered if you haven't yet. Join the snagless revolution. Use the code THE1CAST, all one word, at checkout to save 10%. Ben, Trey, what's going on, guys?
Not much. Enjoying this nice weather we're finally having here in North Carolina. Get 80 degrees. Hopefully, it seems like the last month during the week warms up. Come Friday, cold front storm comes through, and I think that's affected the fishing of some of your tournaments going on the last few weeks.
I'm just ready for the pollen to go away. Like, it's really jacking me up. I know myself and my daughter, we get really, really messed up from the pollen, but I will tell you that at least we're not facing snow. Like some of the states in the north. I talked to my mom, and she's like, yeah, we're supposed to get dumped with snow over the weekend. I'm like, yeah.
I called my dad this morning. He's like, I'm like, what are you doing? He was like, putting wood on the fire. I was like, what? I was like, what, you're camping? He was like, no, it was 27 this morning. I was like, oh, it's 80.
Yeah, it's definitely been nice. It's definitely helped our fishing out. And we're going to talk about some of that too. So,
But you know the worst thing about pollen and fishing?
Is the pollen on the water.
Not just on the water. It is that
In
time
the
of
water,
year. But in the
live
water,
scope.
try to use live scope with a bunch of pollen in the water.
Yeah.
It just clouds everything up.
Yeah, I see. I'm in a bunch of the groups, like for the different sonars and stuff, and every day somebody posts a picture. And they're like, I can't see anything. What's wrong? And I'm like, where are you at? And they're like, North Carolina. I'm like, it's pollen.
you know what I've never done? And I guess I've seen it happen before, but I've never done it myself. Like taking what is it, like dish soap out there and like a squirt gun.
Oh,
just
yeah.
squirting the pollen off the water. I've never done that before.
Yeah, I actually fished with a guy, like during bed fishing season. If we had a tournament, it was raining, he would carry a spray bottle of like vegetable oil with him, and he would get into a flat and he would spray it down because it would dissipate the ripples from the water because of the way it happened.
I
Dude,
tried
was
it
nuts.
once. I tried it one time. I had some dish soap and all, and I don't know if I did, but like I just had to get way too close.
Yeah.
And it was caked with pollen, so maybe that was probably, it was in the back of a
One
cove.
of those big pollen mats.
Yeah,
It's
there
like
was-
2 inches thick.
Yeah, and it was a big fish under there too. But
I remember when Heavy Hitters was here. I think it was Adrian Avena caught one out of one of those pollen mats on Jordan with a frog. He just threw it.
Oh, yeah.
Fishing like he was
Yeah,
fishing a weed mat and ended up catching one. But yeah, the pollen I'm over. The cold fronts I'm over. We got another one this weekend. Not quite as bad, but still a storm all day Saturday. About a 15-degree temperature swing Sunday. Jordan is high, and I've been having to sit at work, which really stinks because when Jordan gets about that 3-foot mark, it gets really good. So I'm going to get out there tomorrow, hopefully after work, and take a friend of ours and do a little bit of fishing. But
Before we get started talking about, because I know this last weekend, Pete, you had your tournament up at Lake Gaston, which is up by the Virginia border. And then you had yours and Sharon Harris, Trey, this. Before we get into that, because we want to talk about kind of what's going on in our neck of the woods and some of the success or lack of success you all had out there. Just depends on who you were. But there's definitely some bass fishing news going around. And the first is that, I don't know if you all saw, but the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame announced their inductees for 2023, right? So this year, 2023. So the big name that we all probably heard about is Mike Iaconelli.
That's right.
Yeah.
He is an absolute stud in the industry. He's been a fan favorite. He's had a lot of success. I know Pete, he's up closer to where you all, he's from Delaware, right?
No, Philly. He was from Pennsylvania. He grew up in Philadelphia, yeah.
But Delaware River is his home water.
Yeah, right there.
That's why. Yeah, so I know you followed him for a long time. So if you want to rattle off some of the success he had,
yeah, big fan of his growing up, being a Pennsylvania guy, and when I was young, I liked his running around, yelling, hollering. He was, I mean, you figure 03 when he won that first classic or won his classic, he was, I don't know, 20 something years old. And everybody remembers when he caught that winning fish and he was screaming, never give up at the last minute. And a pretty cool story. But yeah, so he's one of the few guys that have fished BASS, went to MLF, has come back to BASS, had success on both. He's won the classic in 2003, like I said, won Angler of the Year in 2006. He also won a Bass Nation Championship in 1999, the only angler to do all three of those, by the way. Mm-hmm. He won a bunch of opens. I can't remember exactly how many, but I think 3 or 4 opens. Mm-hmm. He's won on the BASS Kayak Series in 2021 before he came back to BASS to fish the boat side. Won a tournament fishing out of a kayak. Won the Summit Cup with MLF in 2017. Just a stud and probably modern day, I would say, the definition of self-marketing and just sticking with who he was. He was, he got a lot of hate. If you watch,
he got a lot of hate, but he was right. He came to visit the Flambeau booth, which was right next to ours at the Bassmaster Classic, because he was coming over for an hour to do pictures, signings, and they had a line wrapping around to the other side of the building like an hour or two before he was even supposed to be there. So I think you're right. He had a lot of hate early on. I think there was some backlash of, let's be real. Sometimes I find his screaming a little annoying. To me,
he's one of those guys that walks the line, right? Like there's a line between professionalism. There's a line where you go a little bit too far. There's a lot of guys that have done that in their career. Iaconelli, Ishman Rose, a guy that's always kind of walked that line between being a little bit too far or being, professional. Matt Robertson toes that line all the time. We haven't really gotten into it, but, he's right there on that line a lot of times. And the hate wasn't really from fans for Iaconelli, but if you go back and watch clips of other guys fishing and Mike's close and he catches a fish and they hear him pooping, a lot of times you'll see him look at the camera and go, if that was my boy, he'd have got a whooping.
Love him or hate him, the guy has made a huge impact in the industry.
Absolutely.
From the professional tournament angling side of the house to marketing and sales for all the sponsors that he gets support from, to now the kayak world and the Ike Foundation. So he has a lot of irons in the fire.
Oh yeah.
And he takes a very unique approach to how he doesn't change himself. I mean, at least I don't know him personally, but like I said, love him or hate him, he is Ike, and no matter what, everybody knows the phrase "never give up."
Yep.
Oh, exactly. And I wanted to, when I said I thought, it was a little annoying. His scream is a little high pitched and over the top for me. We can all recognize it. I have no problem with it because he's not doing anything really against the other competitors or I think unprofessional. It's just, you're right. It's exactly who he is because he's been the same way. And if you watch him off the water, if you get to watch him off, he's he's high strung. He
doesn't have an off button.
Exactly. He's wired that way.
Like I know John and the guys at Missile who he works with, he designed some jigs and they'll tell you like, if they go out to a dinner with everybody or do anything, Ike is 100% on all the time. He never shuts that off from the minute he wakes up to the minute he goes to bed. So
one of the most entertaining things, and maybe you guys have seen this, and yes, full disclosure, I have TikTok. But I'm just an old guy trying to make TikToks. That's what it says on my TikTok. How many times can I say TikTok? But I saw a couple videos. One of the ones I just saw recently was his interaction with what you would consider a Karen. And she's telling him to get off, not fish around her area. And he was extremely professional, very polite. And then he got to the point where it was like, all right, call the cops. I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Right. Like he got super just, all right, you've crossed the lines. I really like seeing those videos with Ike. And the other one that I saw, and this was years ago, was when he had an interaction. I think it was with KVD. I want to say it was KVD.
Oh, yeah.
And they had an interaction on the water. And if you know anything about Kevin Van Dam, obviously from Kalamazoo, Michigan, you get two Northerners barking at each other, it can go down. You know what I'm saying? There is no hospitality.
I remember that one. That was a little heated. He got into, there's another one with him and a local angler too, where he was idling a grass line and went around the guy, and the guy actually started it with him, and then they kind of went back and forth. So,
I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I think his real legacy is because of the personality he brought, allowed other people to bring personality to make the sport more engaging for the fans, so we can get to know. I mean, a little more authentic.
I also think when you see some of those interactions either with other anglers or things like that, and they go a little bit sideways, that because people know who he is and the way that he is, that they might take it that way because they know they can get a reaction. But I'm excited that he made it in. You can't question.
Oh, he should definitely be
what
in.
he's done for the industry, what he's done as a fisherman, and what his charity's done for young folks getting in.
There's two other people. Lastly, congratulations to Ike. Like he totally deserves it. There's two other individuals that were inducted in the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, and the other two I don't know, but we did do some research on them. And one of the gentlemen's name is Bruce Holt. Bruce worked with G. Loomis and Shimano as an executive in the industry for 45 years, and that's a substantial amount of time. And he was really integral in like propelling bass fishing, specifically rod technology. So congratulations to him. He was inducted. You guys got anything else on him?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I didn't know who he was until we reread the induction, but he's one of those behind the scenes guys that does a lot for the industry, right? And because of his positions at G. Loomis and Shimano, right? It's just not the lures and the rods that we get, but it's a support for the industry and the tournament, especially back when tournament was, that was the industry. We didn't have social media and all these other avenues. Being a part of that and helping promote bass and the tournament, right? Definitely there's a reason why he was, he's being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
I think a lot of times we get starstruck with football players and professional bass anglers and so on and so forth, but there's a lot of logistics behind everything everything. And so those people that are actually making the sausage are the ones that we tend to never see.
Yep.
And that's important for the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame or for any organization to really recognize. Pete's wife, she's making some sausage at Cash and Rods, man, like really getting after it. And so it's not only the piece of technology that you should respect, but the people behind the product, and he did that.
Yeah, and what I do like about the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, it's kind of like the NBA, or it's not the NBA Hall of Fame, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you got coaches and I don't know if athletic directors and GMs and all, right? It's not just necessarily athletes, maybe an owner or a coach in there, right? There's a lot of folks in this industry, in this sport, that because it goes well beyond tournament, right? There's a lot of conservation involved. There's a lot, right? Just, most folks go out and just fish for fun. That there's a lot of different avenues that really to make this entire industry work, right? It's not just a tournament. So you've got to pay the respect to the guys to do it behind the scenes, right? So Bruce is one we just mentioned, and the other one is an OG, and it's the only way I can describe him after reading about him. That's Glenn Andrews, right? Because he was an industry pioneer who helped, form the modern bass fishing rules, and at the first All-American tournament, which I believe is 1967
In Arkansas.
Yep. He was right side by side by Ray Scott, I think, running that thing. So he was very instrumental with that, and he had some success back in the 60s, winning some state championships in Missouri and Arkansas. So definitely an OG of the sport and of this industry. And
He was the first guy to market the Texas rig.
Yeah.
well,
Pretty much the first thing that all bass anglers start off fishing with is like a Texas rig.
Even if you don't know what it is.
Even if you don't know what it is, a Texas rig. So
Yep.
thank you, Glenn Andrews, for the Texas rig or pioneering that.
Yeah, and I think it's cool, that he helped form tournament rules in the 60s that are still followed today. So, I caught some heat because I said bass fishing hasn't changed a lot. When obviously bass fishing has changed a lot. But the rules that we do and kind of the, I guess the mentality or the sportsmanship going into it hasn't changed a whole lot. So it's pretty neat that those rules have stayed the same, and they haven't had to make a bunch of performance enhancing drug illegal and things like that, like some other sports. But
what do you think a life scope is?
that's a tool. That's a tool, not a drug.
So is HGH.
Well, yeah.
It's a tool.
Does bass fishing, does professional bass fishing have a code of conduct?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, so each tournament has-
specific organizations do. Yeah, so like BSS has one. I'm sure MLF has one.
Yeah.
I mean, even most of your clubs
clubs,
have
yeah.
a
Their bylaws.
bylaw. Yeah,
Yeah.
which essentially is that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just brag, I assume.
Yeah. We've all got, because you lay out how the tournaments are going to be run, how points are going to be calculated, and what the violations are. Like if someone cuts you off and they're within 50 feet of you, then that's a violation.
Yep.
Yeah, we may talk about that.
No, we're not going to talk about that. But anyway, yeah. So those three folks getting into the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. So again, congratulations to Bruce Holt, who I believe is still living. No, Bruce was the one that had passed away. So Bruce Holt.
And Glenn, I believe, is 89.
Glenn Andrews, 89 years old. And obviously Ike and Ellie, I believe, is 50 this year. Congrats.
He doesn't
congrats
look a day
to
over
those
25.
No, he really does. If you look,
No, man.
I mean, other than when he won that first classic and he was a real skinny inner city kid with his spiked hair and looked like he weighed about 9 pounds. He hasn't changed a whole lot in all those years. But congrats to those folks. Yeah. And super excited to have some new members in there. And
one more thing I want to mention here before we wrap up this Bass Fishing Hall of Fame discussion, because it sounded like you were about to transition there.
I was.
But the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, right, offers a scholarship to folks going to college. So a couple episodes ago, we had Corey Oakley on, who is his official title is the Assistant Chief for sport fish for inland fisheries for North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission. So he's got a master's degree in biology of some sort, fish biology. So
I'm really proud of you for not butchering that.
Well,
I would have butchered it. But anyway.
Well, I know that because I spent like an entire 2 days chopping up those clips. Right?
Oh, that's true.
But I watched a lot of the episode. And I had to type it out a bunch because people want to debated scientists. I'm like, okay, well,
here's one.
what do you do for a living? But if you do want to do that for a living, right?
Yep, fisheries management.
Talk about a good transition there. They offer a scholarship to $15,000 for students seeking a degree in natural resources and fishery management. So the deadline's May 31st, 2023. You can probably just Google the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame scholarship. But we wanted to bring that out because one, I think we think it's a very interesting topic. We love the discussion we had with Corey. I think we all need to have more discussions with our wildlife management as anglers. And we need good folks, right, to go in there and try to manage these populations so that they're here for the generation. So if you're interested, make sure you go check that out.
If you want to become a better bass angler, then there's no better way to learn about a bass and its resources, its habitat, everything like that, than going to school for it and getting the science behind it. And that's for Corey, and I'll stay on this just for a second. Like, I learned so much, and there's so much more to learn. And Bass is offering this opportunity. You can go right to the Bassmaster website. There's a PDF document that's on there that breaks down all the criteria needed for somebody submitting that application. Like Ben said, 31 May of this year, 2023 is when the deadline's due. Go get smart on bass and then go catch more.
And then just one last thing on that. We're going to have Corey back because we got a lot still to talk to him about. We got the hot topics out of the way, but we want to talk about fish behavior, things like that. We want to talk about careers in fishery. So if you're a young person listening, maybe a sophomore, junior in high school, you're not really eligible for that this year, we're going to have an episode coming later here in 2023 where we're going to talk about the different avenues of going into fisheries management and the different things you can do with that. So, stay tuned for that. And if you have a want and a passion and that's something you might be interested in, that scholarship is going to be around for a while, I'm sure. So definitely check that out.
I mean, Trey, as you said, right, if someone wants to become a better angler, right, become a fishery biologist, but there's somebody who has proven to be a very good angler here recently. And this was on display again at the last Bassmaster Open, which is on Toledo Bend. And I don't know, Trey, Pete, I know you guys were keeping up with it. What'd you guys think? What happened?
Yeah, so I'm a fan of the guy, and I have been for a while. I've seen both sides of the hate he gets and people that like him. The MFers, as he calls them, because he's Milliken fishing. But Ben Milliken, 2 Opens tournaments now. His first 2 multi-day tournaments he's ever fished. Has a 5th place and a 1st place now. He's won his second Open he's ever fished. He's going to fish the Classic next year, almost on a home lake, which is scary to think about. He's right there in Texas now, fishing Grand Lake, Oklahoma waters. He's spent a lot of time. Similar waters he spent a lot of times on. Obviously, there's other guys. Jason Christie's an Oklahoma guy. There's some other folks that are locals, but the dude, I mean, he made a name for himself from YouTube, and I'm sure that's where Trey found him, where most folks have found him, obviously. what I like about his YouTube videos and even now his tournament recaps is he tells you exactly what he did. When he sat up there and got that trophy, he stood there and broke down all 3 days exactly what he did each day, how it changed, what he found. We talk about it all the time, right, Trey? Ben, we want to grow the industry until it's time to grow the industry. Milliken wants to see people go fish and wants to see them be successful. I'll let Trey talk a little bit because he's gotten a lot of hate. I don't know how much of it he's seen, but
yeah, I mean, when he first started out, he was one of the pioneers in the YouTube industry, along with some of the other people that we mentioned in previous episodes. But I think it's important. I think he went from the football field to the fishing industry, if I'm not mistaken. I think didn't he play college level football, or maybe for a certain period of time. He has he's a family man, right? But he did something very unique, pretty much by himself, and worked his way. And we talked about it previously. Worked his way from YouTube into 6 Sense Fishing. Now being part owner. Now fishing the opens, elite qualifiers. But he has received a lot of hate. In fact, I remember watching one video where he was doing some bait reviews where he cut open the baits and talked about how similar certain bait organizations were copying baits, and he wanted to cut those open for his fans to show them the details and what they were really looking at and how similar certain things were and stuff like that. But he has gotten a lot of hate. He's taken a lot of risk. He's uprooted his family from Nebraska.
Well, even before that, he had a very well-paying job as a PM in a big firm and was making good money, and started making a little bit of money on YouTube, and said he took a leap of faith when, I mean, pre-Guggen, and it was kind of when everybody was coming up, John B and all those, but he was one of those, like you said, pioneers that even before this one that you're about to talk about, quit a job, I'm sure 6-figure job with a wife and a child, to chase YouTube content and his passion to fish.
And he's not the only one. Like, so many of those anglers out there are risking a lot by trying to fish professionally. From Mark Daniels Jr., who had a really good, I think he had a state government or maybe a private job working as a biologist. And then you got Brian Latimer, who was
got fired by his own dad.
Yeah, but he's somebody that's really created a niche in the industry. He's got a lot of hate for it. Go ahead, Pete.
I just want to say, I think what's unique with him is a lot of these guys quit jobs to go fish, right? He didn't have to fish the opens to try to qualify for the elites or do anything more than what he's been doing. I mean, you're talking about a guy that averages 250,000 to 500,000 views on his YouTube videos, has close to 1 million. I think he's well over 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that.
Yep.
He was successful fishing local stuff. There's plenty of guys we know in North Carolina alone that have made a living fishing local tournament trails. It's not something that he had to do.
No, but I think I don't know, but if I was him, all the hate that I got would inspire me to go lay a bunch of waste on the water.
It's interesting. After his latest win here, I actually saw a lot of positive feedback on Facebook, a lot of the comments. I think sometimes there was maybe it was deserved, but there's a reputation that the YouTube anglers weren't serious, professional anglers, that they couldn't do at the highest level because, right, like take Milliken, for example. He's out catching big fish all the time. He's showing exactly what you're doing, but you don't necessarily know the movie YouTube magic that goes on and how much editing and actually how much time was spent in the water for that little clip, right?
Right.
Sometimes you just don't know, and and because you're not seeing them at this next level, you're not really sure. And look, some other YouTubers have tried to fish the opens, and they didn't go the whole season because that did not work out for them. Yeah.
But I want to, but I'm not going to.
No, I mean,
anyway.
like he's made a name for himself, and I think more than anything, he's proven to the industry not only is he good at marketing a product, not only is he good at being a content creator, but now he's good at fishing a multi-day tournament.
He marketed himself.
He's not good.
He's
phenomenal
really,
right now. I don't think people realize his second open ever. He won the open.
Yeah.
Not by close. It was by
over 10 pounds.
It's not even so much
landslide. And the first one he was in, he finished 5th.
And they not canceled yet.
They canceled a day, and those fish were coming to him.
Yeah.
He had a shot,
Like
a legitimate shot.
I think the weights were a lot closer down at Eufaula,
Yeah,
right?
they were closer.
I think he was maybe 5 or 6 pounds. But
I don't even
maybe
know if he was that. Yeah,
But
he had a shot if they don't cancel that day to potentially win the first 2, and I think also impressive. It's really the first 2 multi-day tournaments he's ever won. And if anybody out there fishes tournaments, if you've never fished a multi-day tournament, it's a whole different thing. And you can go out and be a hammer, right? And win your one day. I say your little club one days, blah, 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 because that's all I fish now anyway. And that's a lot of the hate he got. Oh, yeah, you can go out and beat up your local guys on a Tuesday nighter, but you couldn't hang with the big dogs. And you would see it all the time when he would do his local tournament recap videos. Well, I think he's shut them up pretty effectively at this point. A 1st and a 5th in his first 2 tournaments.
he's fishing the Bassmaster Classic next year.
Eufaula was a lake he had never fished prior to pre-fishing for this event. He had never been on it and came in 5th. Obviously, he had some experience on Toledo Bend, being from Texas. Really interested to see what he does when he comes up here to North Carolina to bugs. I've talked to a few folks I know fishing EQs that have asked me about Bugs Island. This is being recorded. They're still allowed to get information. It's not closed yet. But those folks reached out, and North Carolina, if you don't have a lot of experience here, Trey said it on several podcasts. I'll say it. If you can catch a bass here, you can catch a bass anywhere, because this is a tough state to fish.
Other
in.
than a private stocked pond, if you can catch a fish in North Carolina, you can catch one anywhere.
It is. It's tough because we don't have the grass like you do in northern fisheries on most bodies of water. Also, people don't understand how much pressure these local, especially the lakes local to us, Jordan Falls, Harris, Gaston, Norman, the number of tournaments, the number of guys that are just out there fishing for fun, the number of people bank fishing, it's not like anywhere else in the world or in the country.
This brings up an interesting...
And it's that pressure can be year round.
It brings up an interesting discussion. I was actually looking on the map the other day. It's like, what other big cities, right? If I wanted to go on vacation, but be nice to like a destination lake, but like be close to a downtown or something, where would I want to go to?
Gunnersville.
Like, there's not a lot of places. Mm-mm. Like when you think a lot of the big bodies of water you want to go to, there's not like a big city around it to, if you want to go for a week or 2.
Yeah.
Raleigh, Raleigh's just so big, right? And their lakes here are relatively small, 14,000 acres, 15,000 acres, 5,000 acres. Norman's huge, but we know it's not very productive. And then it's huge, right? Charlotte's right there. And so there's definitely a lot of pressure, and that's maybe some of the reason with North Carolina.
Yeah. I think pressure plays a big role.
Yeah.
There's not as much structure where you don't have hydrilla, you don't have other grasses. And we talked about it with Corey, right? It was like shooting fish in a barrel on Harris back when we had hydrilla, because you just fish the hydrilla, those fish could get spread out. They're more concentrated now on a lake like that because there's only so much structure for those fish to be on. Mm-hmm. You see it at Jordan. When you find those community holes at Jordan, there's a little bit more room there to wiggle around, but those primary community holes, there's a lot of guys that fish them every day. Even at the same time. And I've looked, it looked like boats were tied to each other fishing some of the offshore humps and things. So guys and gals that are successful usually find some things that aren't as popular, but, hold a few fish. But you don't, I was actually talking to my dad today in Pennsylvania, and they fish Presque Isle and Lake Erie there. And it gets pressure this time of year as the smallmouth start stage just spawn. But I had to say, you've been down here, you've seen pressure. I've fished Jordan in a 90 boat tournament going out of Farrington, and there's a 40 boat tournament going out of one of the other
There's no spots. Like if it's summertime, offshore type, there were no spots. Everyone's sitting on one. I think we talked about this before. And, up north, because a lot of places freeze over and it gets so cold, that pressure diminishes on those fish for several months at a time. And then I because there's other fisheries that are important up there, pike, muskie, walleye. Yeah. It takes some of the pressure away. When you move south, North Carolina's in that weird transition. Like you start going down to South Carolina and Georgia, Florida, you start seeing more grass in our lakes.
Yep.
Eelgrass, hydrilla, more milfoil, coontail, even like Kissimmee type of, grass. Like, just kind of weird transition here. And when I think going out west, right? You Tennessee River lakes, and out towards like Missouri and Bull Shoals. Those lakes, one, are a whole lot bigger. They also pull a lot more current.
Current, you have a lot more rock.
Which they don't hardly pull any here unless it's a flood.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have other conditions that are messing up the fish because the water's raising, it's muddy, etc. You know,
like we're dealing with now. But so back to Milliken before we get too off, because we're going to talk about our fishing and we'll talk more about all this. But I know we talked about it. I'm interested to see how he does here because it's a different style of fishery.
Well, to circle it back around to pressure, I think he is doing something that works well under high pressured fisheries.
Agreed.
You know, he's not necessarily going after the same fish that a lot of anglers are going after. He's not necessarily just running the banks, because most of these southern lakes, the right time of the year, you can catch 5 off the bank, but are you going to catch the right 5? And I think that's, if he was doing anything right, like he knows how to use his electronics. He knows how to trigger big bass to bite big baits. He also knows when not to use those big baits, right? So when you look at his first tournament, he started deep cranking and he limited out within the first 5 casts. But he knew how to manage those holes that he was fishing. And then when you fast forward to Toledo Bend, he's fishing a shad spawn. And then he's fishing. What was he fishing the first day?
First day he was fishing, I believe, offshore. And that's where he'd found in practice, and it kind of dwindled on him. And then, just to recap a little bit, he found clay banks, main lake points and things. He found a shad spawn early. It was actually going a little longer than normal, but I don't know if that's normal in Texas, whatever. But he found a thread fin spawn and started throwing a bigger bait, getting bigger bites. Well, then he noticed that threadfin spawn ended, and all of a sudden a bunch of gizzard shad moved up and started spawning. And for those that don't know, a gizzard shad, 8-9 inches you can find gizzard shad. And when you see a lot of those big swim baits and they get that big round profile, that's simulating a gizzard shad. So he found that. And it was something nobody else was doing. Clearly, I'm sure some other folks were fishing that threadfin spawn, but he saw those gizzards move in. And he just started running that stuff. And, he averaged 25 pounds. If it's a 4-day tournament, he's in a Century Club. Assuming the last day, the bottom doesn't fall out. Yeah. But to average 25 pounds on your second open event over 3 days is wild to me.
And you're right. Like, we'll see what happens the rest of the tournaments of the year. He has a lot of momentum. He's doing something that he likes to do. I think that's important with all anglers fishing competitively, is fish your strengths. And if that gut feeling does tell you, and you can burn out on a gut feeling. It's happened to me tons of times. And we're talking 1-day tournaments, but that gut feeling and you're going with it. But I think that's what makes him, special right now in 2023, is he is adapting to change. He knows how to target big fish. Maybe it was learned from OH Ivy, but maybe it's just he knows how to use his electronics. He knows how to trigger fish.
I was going to say, he was doing it long before OH Ivy.
He was on Fish the Moment the other night with Johnny doing a live, and I watched a little bit of it, and he was in that swim bait game, before there were really swim baits. I think he was talking about how Tactical Bass maybe had 1 or 2 early swim bait videos. So 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
He started out fishing a 6-inch, I forget the name of the bait, but the top hook, like a little pokey bait you can, but 6-inch. And then he did a lot of experimenting. And then over the years, and of course now it's probably been exponential learning after having live scope and seeing fish reactions. Like, he's extremely confident in targeting big fish on bodies of water that typically haven't been fished that way. We're starting to see more of it because it's becoming more of a trend because of the mag draft and all that. He's got the confidence and the experience and a technique that a lot of other guys don't have nearly as much on. I
don't have it. No. I got mag drafts tied on right now. I got glide baits. I got all sorts of stuff, and I just do not have the confidence. I think that's one of his strongest traits is he dedicates himself to doing something different. And he became strong at it.
He's proved he can catch them anyway. He's proved he can catch them on big baits. And the last thing I have to say on Ben Millikens is he could bomb the rest of the year, whatever. He's doing something 99% of us are never going to do, and he's fishing a Bassmaster Classic next year. Yeah. He won an open tournament. The dude can fish, and there would still be people hating, saying, well, he did it in his home state, blah, blah, blah. He's only lived in Texas for 2 years, by the way. Yeah. But it's really cool to see somebody hone their craft. And when people ask why now, he said, because I finally feel that it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. I finally feel like my skill set is well-rounded and good enough that I can go out and compete with these folks.
Yeah.
And he's doing it. And to the point today, he's competed and he's at the top of the leaderboard for points for the year. Yeah.
For all the guys jumping in that aren't fishing all the EQs and they're just fishing locally here at Bugs Island in the opens, go get after it. You know what I mean? Go fish against them and see how. I mean, Bugs it can be an easy place to fish, but it can be extremely challenging because it's in North Carolina. Everything's challenging in North Carolina. So last thing I'll say on him is I like how he's repping his area code. On stage. He's keeping it simple. He's standing proud for his homeboys. I know I got a couple buddies that are stationed here at Fort Bragg that know him, and they're super proud of that. And circling back around to pressure real quick, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this, and maybe it's not like this at other military installations, but when you talk about pressure on a body of water against a lake that's 4,000 acres or 13,000 acres, we're not talking 100 boats being a significant amount of pressure. We're talking 10 to 15 boats that know where the community holes are at. Mm-hmm. That puts a lot of pressure on these lakes. And a lot of the people around this military installation are retired, fish Sunday through Sunday. They get after it every single day of the week. So I don't know if a lot of veterans fish, but I can tell you in my experience, like retired veterans are out on the water putting the hammer down and they're putting a lot of pressure on it. Good for them. I'm glad they're out there, but a lot of pressure does get put on the bodies of water. So we'll see what happens at Bugs. It'll be interesting.
So we talk about pressure, different bodies of water, North Carolina. Trey and I both had tournaments this past weekend. Ben's been fishing locally. He doesn't really do the tournament stuff, but he's been getting out when he does. Trey was the closest on old Cheryl Harris. Old Sharon Harris here, right down the road from us. So Trey, you want to talk about, let's have you talk about yours first, because you had one day PBC.
Yep.
It's a mid-April tournament here in North Carolina. So if you live further north, maybe about a month this is coming to you. If you live further south, maybe wait next year. It might apply. Who knows? Yeah,
so mid-April, Sharon Harris. Really nice to fish Harris just due to the fact that it's like 5 minutes down the road from the house. But I was looking forward to that tournament just because I spend so much time on that body of water. And, for those of you who don't know, it's a relatively small reservoir. It is part of the Cape Fear River basin. It is not there's no warm water discharge in that lake. So I've seen it on some threads before where people are like, oh, that's a hot hole lake. Like, no, it's not. Like the warm water discharge is in a lake that's up above the lake. So yeah, we fished the Piedmont Bass Classics Trail. We had 54 boats mid-April. I've been fishing it a lot, and there's certain techniques that everybody knows pretty much work on most of these bodies of water in North Carolina during that time, depending on where you're at. I can tell you what did not work was the lizard bite. And it was funny.
We're the daggone lizards.
Yeah. So, the lizards, if you don't know, like the lizards get out during the spring, when the bass start moving up or when fish start moving up in general, a lot of the lizards will get down into the water and they'll start eating the eggs after the fish spawn. A lot of the eagles and ospreys and different birds will grab those lizards. They'll drop in the water. So I know, Ben, you caught your PB, did you not? Or one of your big fish on a lizard on Harris?
Yeah, it was my previous PB, but it was during the spawn at Harris. I was, throwing a lizard in the little reeds they have around there. And I was catching a lot that day. And then I just happened to look over and see a dark spot and flipped over to it. And whatever I was throwing to was not the big fish because she darted out from nowhere and came and grabbed it. She was 7.5 pounds at the time.
Yeah.
That was probably like 7 or 8 years, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah. That bite wasn't on. And geez. Pete, you fished the Spring Warrior Clash a couple weeks ago on the lake. And that was a tough one. That was a tough one. That was earlier April.
High pressure system the day before.
Yeah.
Wind, rain the day before.
I know we mentioned it earlier on, but kind of the pattern the last month really here in North Carolina is that maybe Tuesday through Wednesday will be 70s, even sometimes mid 80s.
Yep.
But windy typically. And then we have a pretty big windstorm and rainstorm either Friday or Saturday.
20, 30 degree temperature swings.
Yeah.
So that was definitely part of my planning factor. So leading up to the tournament on Harris, we had, 3-4 days of good warming trends, moving up into the mid 70s and stuff like that. So we had 54 boats in the tournament. I pretty much knew the pattern we were going to roll with. However, I was very surprised on the lake about mid to the last quarter part of the day. We ended up finishing 6th out of 54 boats, cashed a check. And it was a really good tournament. We caught one over that was 5.7 pounds. However, I haven't seen this in a long time, but the winners of that tournament caught 22 pounds. And if you knew anything about this lake, or if you know anything about this lake, this was a lake that back in the day, you could go and catch 30 plus pound bags. And that means all the fish are over 20 inches, right? Because 16 to 20 inches, that slot limit, we talked about it with Corey in detail.
Yeah, it used to be very good trophy lake. If you go watch that episode of Corey, there's a lot of factors involved of what's changing at Harris. So I definitely go check it out. Because even if you're not in North Carolina, it could apply to any lake depending on what happens.
Yeah, there were several 40-pound bags caught there in the heyday.
Oh, yeah. And even though I'm on that lake a lot, it was still different than I was on the lake on Monday and we fished Saturday, and it was a very different bite. Your traditional baits were working because fish were on the bed. So your traditional Texas rigs, thank you, recent inductee in the Hall of Fame. For the Texas rig, your wacky worms were working. Started the morning off with top water because sometimes you can generate a good top water bite. I got a good buddy that's been catching some overs, but we didn't get any top water bites. So throughout the day, it just kept getting warm, man. It was hot. It was really hot. We did catch a 5 fish limit, our biggest being 5.7, put us in 6th, but it was interesting. So the very last 2 hours of the day, we found a post-spawn, like tertiary point inside of a cove in dirty water with a jerkbait in about 1.5 foot water. And my fishing partner, if you don't know anything about the Piedmont Bass Classics Trail, it's a team trail, and he picked up a jerkbait. And I was like, what? There's no wind. It's hot. I'm like, what are you doing? It just kind of goes against everything that we all think, like we know what the bass are going to do. And he rips that jerkbait and he's like, I got one. I was like, no, you don't. Yes, he does. So he's bringing this fish in. I nut the fish. He puts it in the live well. And I'm like, well, I'll just take his rod then and just whip that jerkbait out there. Whack, whack. 2 more fish. And then a fourth fish eventually. And it was really cool. So just when you think you know what's going on, you learn something new.
Yep.
And so we rolled with that for a little bit.
That jerkbait bite I have found has been very effective during the actual spawn for me over the years. I learned that down on Watery several years ago that I couldn't get these bass to bite on the bed. So I'm just going to throw a jerkbait up there and see. And I went over the bed and this big female came out of nowhere and grabbed me. And this year on my little lake, I know they're up there, and so I'm just working it, kind of because they bed them and then it drops off and all. And like it's been very effective. That it's just that it's ripping through, and it's like a bait fish chasing it, and just swim baits do really well too.
Yep,
they'll just come attack a swim bait. Coming across like a big swim bait coming across the bed.
Yeah, and I did throw a mag draft in the morning. I tried to generate a big bite on mag draft, a big bite on a buzz bait. I didn't have any luck, but what I did see is I 100% saw a shad spawn. And my fishing partner didn't believe me. And I'm like, how do you not believe me? There's a mile stretch of shad flickering on the bank line. But there was definitely a shad spawn. It caught probably the biggest crappie I've ever seen caught on a Texas rig. It was crazy. The crappie was like, I don't know, he's probably a pound. But it wasn't without a challenge. And I say that because we talked about that pressure a little bit ago. We also had another tournament series at the same ramp. And mind you, a 4,000 acre lake, give or take, a little bit over that.
Yeah, but how many at least 1,200 of that's not fishable, right?
Right, that's right. There's a lot of buoyed off areas
1,500,
that you
like
can't
that.
fish close to the plant. So not only did you have 54 boats in the Piedmont Bass Classics, you had over 20-something boats in another local trail. And then you had a crappie tournament that was fishing between Jordan Lake and Harris. They had to weigh in at Farrington Boat Ramp on Jordan, but they could fish either lake. And so there were several crappie fishermen. And then the wakeboarders are out, gentlemen.
Yeah.
The wakeboarders are out. The tubers, the wakeboarders, the jet skiers, the leisure. So
That's actually why I didn't really get out this weekend on my lakes. I can't. They're already out.
yeah, they're out. And granted, everybody needs to be able to share the water, but every single spot you went on the lake, there was at least 2 to 4, if not 5 boats in a cove. And so it was really funny. My fishing partner said, I know you're a nice guy, but I want you to get a little aggressive and fish close to people. I was like, well, I can get aggressive. How close I'm going to get will depend on the other person. And so we fished behind people the entire day. So I think it really just, a lot of luck played into it. But there's also a certain way that I fish that lake that it just tends to work for me. So all in all, great tournament. I was really looking forward to that one because I didn't have to get up at 3:00 in the morning, even though I did. And I started dumping ice in my live well because I don't have a lot of money, so I can't afford an Icon boat. And we went out there and brought 5 alive back to the scales. And North Carolina was out there continuing to do what they do best, and that's collecting DNA samples on any largemouth that's over 5 pounds. And there were several 5, 6, 7, and even an 8.5 brought back to the scales. So it was a great event, and my wife came out for it, so that was really cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I fished a completely different fishery, one that's been destroyed by the old Alabama bass in Lake Gaston.
The invasion.
The invasion of the Alabama bass, the spotted bass that isn't a spotted bass, but is. They are 2 different species. We've had people arguing on social media all week how spot's a spot, but they're not. We fished Lake Gaston, my club, 2 days. Saturday, Sunday, each day is a separate tournament in our regular season because you have to fish 10 to qualify for the end of year championship, and so they break them up into 2 separate ones in case you can only fish one day.
So are there 10 events? Like 10
No, there's
weekends?
more than 10 events.
Okay, so
But they break it in so if you can only fish Saturday, can't fish Sunday, you don't lose out on a whole tournament.
Okay.
And then our classic this year's on Norman, and it'll be a Saturday, Sunday combined weight tournament. Because
Spotted
in
bass?
November on Norman, so it's
You better pay attention to their their medulla oblongata or whatever you said.
Their Pete uncle.
This-
Her Pete
I'm going to
uncle.
tell you the pattern right now.
Drop
Live
shot.
scope and Alabama rig.
Yeah, that's pretty much
Go-
my plan.
You're going to pull into a cove,
I'm just gonna look at
hop on the trolley motor. You don't see a school, you pull to another cove.
I'm gonna try to catch all 5 on one cast on an Alabama rig.
Catch 'em by their
5
Pete uncle.
keepers. But so I got up there Friday evening, didn't get to pre-fish at all. Pretty much everybody we fish against had been there since Wednesday or Thursday. They spent a few days, so a lot of those guys had a little bit of advantage. We had a really bad storm Friday night, like all night. We were supposed to get hit with a little bit. It ended up raining from like 9 p.m. till 3 or 4 a.m. So it was a little bit different than what they had experienced in practice because I got a little bit of info for some guys that I'm close with in the club. And that bite that they had talked about was not there. So kind of trash fished entirely on Saturday. I only ended up with four keepers for no weight. Their spots. So it was like 7 pounds or something. I had 6 pounds for 4 fish. But at the end of the day, I found a little bit of a pattern. Again, it was fishing slow, either a wacky rig or a shaky head. They were not eating moving baits at all. Everything I caught was either on a wacky rig or a shaky head. The second day, some guys found success on moving baits, but I didn't mess with it because I had found a pretty good bite with the wacky rig and a shaky head fishing weed edges, and then any stump that you found would have a fish on it. So caught a pile of fish. I mean, probably 100 12-inch spots. They're everywhere. I mean, you can't keep them off. Ended up losing a couple nice fish Sunday that would have put me in better position. Just one of those things. You know how it goes. Broke one off because I'll tell you, anybody, if you fish a spot lake, tournament fish or not, keep it in your mind that when you catch a couple, change your, like, retie. Because they got them stupid sharp little teeth. And I'm just catching them rolling down the bank. And I get to a dock, and there there were certain docks and walkways that were holding largemouth where I had seen them. So we got up to one. I said, that looks like where I've been seeing them. Perfect little skip with that wacky rig up underneath there. As soon as it hits the water and starts fluttering around, I see the line go dink, and I go, there she is. I wind down, set the hook, and the line comes back through the air, and there's no hook there. And I'm like, oh, it could have been a 1 pounder. I don't know, but broke that fish off. So that was my big lesson learned from that. I only found 3 or 4 fish that were actually locked on beds. Caught every single one of them, but that storm, I think, what it had done is the wind and rain, lightning, everything had pushed the fish off Friday that the guys had found that were locked on. So Saturday, all the fish I saw were doing big 6, 7 foot, 8 foot circles around their beds, and they just weren't interested in anything. Like I said, I found 3 locked on the first day, caught all 3 of them. There were 3 of my 4. The second day I only found 1, caught it, but they were still just doing those big circles, and it was just a weird tournament because of the weather. I had never seen them pull that kind of water at Gaston. I mean, it was
it ripping?
Dude, like creating wake on the backside of docks ripping. They were pulling so much water because they were flowing out of car from the rain we had the previous week, generating the same time. My plan initially was to run up the river because I had some spots up there that I know.
On the Virginia side?
Yeah. I know I'm one of the only people that can get into a couple of these spots because I run an aluminum rig and I can get into them. And probably had a really good shot if I could have got up there, but it was so dirty. I had a buddy that drove 85 and crossed over some of those areas, and he was like, if you want to fish chocolate milk, make the run, but it's like a 20-some mile run, and I just wasn't going to have it. But, so I learned a lot. You know, it's tough. My biggest thing is learning these bodies of water. The guys that I'm fishing against, some of them have been fishing Gaston since 72.
Yeah.
You know, the 80s, 90s. Same we talk about Jordan. A lot of retired guys fish it Sunday to Sunday. So for me, it's just learning as I go. The club's great. If you're new to an area or new to bass fishing, join a club. They're not all created equal, I will say that, but find a club that's good about sharing information. I mean, guys told me baits they were throwing, stuff they were looking for, and I share the same when I come across something. So you kind of get what you get out of it. But it was a beautiful weekend. We had nice sun, 75, 80 degrees both days.
But what did you do on Sunday differently that you did on Saturday?
So Saturday I spent way more time closer to the bank looking for beds because that had been the pattern that a lot of the guys had found. And it was pretty late in the day because Saturday before about 11:30 it was cloudy. It was overcast. We didn't have any sun to look for beds. So I just kind of trash fished around docks and stuff. Yeah. And then the sun got up and that's when I started looking for beds. So that didn't work as well as I was hoping it would. I noticed the fish were doing circles. So that was when I said later in the day I had found a pretty good bite on the edge of weed lines because they have a lot of bank grass on Gaston.
Yeah.
Some pads that I found on the edge of those, and I ended up catching some fish off those the second day. So that was what I decided, or the first day. So that's what I decided to do the second day. Just stayed back more, worked dock edges under docks with a shaky head and a wacky. Fished a couple rocky main lake. I got my first fish of the day on a main lake point, rocky, just a staging area. Well, not, I guess it'd be a secondary point, but just a staging area, and fished that. And there were a ton of fish around.
Did you weigh 5 in on Sunday?
I weighed 5, so yeah. So I had 5 Sunday.
So you broke the 5.
I broke my 5 fish curse for this year, yeah.
And that's something that we talk about all the time. Like, guys will have momentum. It's either good momentum or bad momentum. And this year, like, I've had some good momentum, but Harris on Saturday was my first 5 fish limit for the season. And I tell you what, there's nothing. I think that is probably the most stressful thing that I deal with is like getting 5.
And what you're saying, like I started off last year, which was my first year with the club, like gangbuster. The very first tournament I fished, my first time ever on Falls Lake, I finished second. And on a tough Falls Lake, guys struggled. I caught a pile of fish. Like I was on them. Came in the next week, finished in the check line. The next tournament in the check line. We went to the river 2-day, cashed a check the first day, didn't the second day. But then I started only 4 keepers. And then 3, and then only 1 on one tournament, and then 2, and so I carried that into this year. And it started with I skunked the first tournament I fished of the year on Jordan. It was just one of those days. We had 3-day warming trend, and then all of a sudden we got that dang high pressure system. The temperature dropped like close to 40 degrees. the fish that were up shallow pushed off, and there was a lot of people that struggled in that one. And then I caught 4 the first day on Gaston, and I'm like, it's never going to end.
Yeah.
But I did end up catching 5.
I always mess with my partner when we were out on Harris, and we didn't have a limit in the boat until it was probably 1:30 in the afternoon. I was like, here we go.
Oh, I didn't text you either.
No, you didn't text me. And everyone,
that's because we were both fishing.
Pete has to text me because he'll be like, do you got anything in the boat yet? And then the last 2 tournaments, last 2 or 3 tournaments, it's been like that. And then bam, I'll catch a fish. But I started thinking about that. That was in my mind, right? Like slot fish, yes, I was catching slots. And that's how you justify it. Like when you break off, I was just a slot fish. When you're not on Harris, that was a 10-pounder, dude.
At least.
That was a 10-pounder.
Not on Gaston.
But I got to thinking about that, and then I'll always mess with my partner and be like, it's the banana, dude. He's like, you did not. I'm like, I didn't. But it's funny. But it's just one of those things. And Pete, you mentioned something like if you're new to an area, check out the clubs, check them all out, and talk to the anglers in the clubs. But if you have a desire to fish competitively, whether or not it's at the local level or you're trying to work your way all the way up at the top, it's good to build scar tissue in these one-day club tournaments, because you'll find out quickly if competitive bass fishing's for you or not.
Yeah, when you zero or have a bad tournament or feel like you're getting stomped, but you want to keep doing it, then like then you know it's still competitive.
Somebody hyped me up over the phone. I won't name names, but you know who you are, and was like, "You better win." And I'm like, "Listen, it's just fishing. I don't care if I'm on the body of water 5 days a week. In the spawn, especially, it's anybody's game."
Yeah, this is a tough time of year anywhere in the country as fish start to spawn.
But those fisheries that we fished, and Ben lives on a very different fishery. Every single fishery that we fished this weekend, whether or not it was your home lake, Gaston, Harris, they're all different. They all set up.
And I will say, I don't know if we influenced it or not, but I know quite a few of our guys listen to podcasts. But it was the first time, and I fished Gaston. This would have been the 4th time I fished with this club. We had a big cooler full of spots on the second day.
Oh,
guys were throwing them in.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we had a play to roll in that or guys were just getting fed up. But, man, having the knowledge that I have getting to talk to Corey and knowing what those fish do, it has absolutely ruined that fishery. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. You can say that you think the spots are making it better. I think the biggest spot weighed was like 2.5 pounds.
Wow.
Guys' fingers are coming back bleeding from catching 12-inch spots, 14-inch spots. I mean, I think the first day 14 pounds won it. Second was like 12 pounds, which is a funny story. I won't call the guy out, but he caught 12 pounds like before 8:30 and thought he had her and came back and took a nap and ordered lunch.
Oh, Timmy Horton did.
But that tells you something that he thought he had.
He thought he had it with 12 pounds. 12 pounds one day too.
Yeah.
12 pounds. I mean, I know it's tough fishing conditions, but it's spawning time.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
if
the spots weren't in there and you had a largemouth fishery, still would have been more. You would have found fish. You would have found bigger largemouth. I mean, big fish was 4 pounds on a lake that used to produce 8, 9, 10-pound fish.
I won big fish on that lake in 2019 with a 4-pounder.
Yeah,
like I came in. I don't know what I placed, but I won big fish.
But if I pull the score sheet and show you, it was like 14-1. 12 was second, and then like the entire rest of the field was like 9 pounds and some ounces. Like the whole rest of the field. It was just like we talked about with Corey and Redcrest. Brian Thrift won averaging 15 pounds a day. Under that, the average was 9, and that's what you're getting on these fisheries where the spotted bass are. So not to go into that again, but don't move fish, people. It is absolutely destroying fisheries. And
Pete will not make it into the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame with 9 pounds of spots.
No. If I make it in the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, it's going to be for hitting him with a baseball bat or something. But don't move fish.
Yeah.
But it was all in all, it was a good weekend. I learned a lot. Learned a different part of the lake. I'd always fished up the lake, if you want to say the river that side. I ran down towards the dam. Cleaner water. I also will say, Trey, you asked what was different. I noticed I couldn't catch fish in dirty water.
Yeah.
So from the rain, the backs of the creeks and stuff were muddied up. Could not get bitten there. So I had to find those areas in clean water.
Yeah. For
me to get bitten. Now other guys did really well in dirty water.
The only time I am successful in dirty water seems to be like late February, early March,
Yep.
red crankbait.
Well,
after a
everything's
warm
dirty
rain. But, well, no, like I would. That's when I would go search it out after a warm rain. That time, very specific set of conditions. I know I can get bit in dirty water. Otherwise, I'm looking for at least 2 to 3 feet visibility if I can get it.
I'm pretty confident in dirty water, but I just couldn't get bit in it.
And then you see the most strange things. Like I watched on Baden Lake a guy win out of the back of the boat with a green pumpkin chatter or a bladed jig in chocolate milk water. I'm like, it doesn't even make any sense, but it did. I mean, he won with like 16 pounds out of the back of a boat, you know. So it was a cool weekend, all in all.
Yep. Good weather.
Good weather. Things are heating up. Things are heating up for us here locally. Things are heating up for the elites, for the opens, like NPFL. They got
schedules heating up. They're just finishing up Wright Patman. They just finished that up, and we'll have one of their anglers on next episode for y'all.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. So breaking it down, we talked about the Hall of Fame inductees. We talked about Milliken. Congratulations to him on smoking the competition on Toledo Bend. We talked about our local derbies and stuff like that. Hopefully we have a better season.
You got anything else?
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I was going to make a joke, but I'm not allowed.
No, come on. Let's hear it. It's going to be about me, so let's just get it out there.
I'm not allowed to fish tournaments because I smoke everybody else. On the Milliken in Raleigh, North Carolina.
That's right.
Oh, man, we're excited to see those guys come down to our home waters.
Yeah,
too,
we're hoping to bring you some on-the-water stuff from the Open, from practice and whatnot. At least Ben and I have applied. We're going to try to get some stuff going from that, some different content for y'all, but...
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, folks, check us out. Leave us a review. Shoot us a comment. Let us know what you think. We appreciate the support. And we'll see you on the next episode.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.